Hey, good evening, everybody. Chief Meteorologist Brad Petovich here. It is Thursday, December 18th, and we've got a lot of rain out there today. We're going to be talking about the weather here first, but we will be diving back into the unfortunate, tragic plane crash today in Statesville that did unfortunately take the life of Greg Biffle and his family. 7 total, pilots, assistant. We'll talk more about that with Tim and what we know, what we don't know, and if whether or not played a part of that as well. But right now, let's focus on the rainfall that really took a while to get here. Early today we had drizzle and mist, but now you see pretty good rainfall falling across most of our area. And even where there's not rain on the radar, I can tell you it's drizzle or mist that continues to fall in many locations. This is a pretty large storm system that is currently moving across the country. There's a pretty strong cold front that is taking shape from southern Michigan down to Mississippi, and that's going to arrive overnight. And I'm thinking 3-4 in the morning time frame. But if we zoom in on this, you could see, boy, we've got a pretty strong line of storms moving through eastern Mississippi into Alabama. There is a tornado watching effect for that area, and you can see what looks like supercells. And if supercells are rotating thunderstorms that produce damaging winds, large hail, and in some cases tornadoes, that area is under a low risk of severe weather today into tonight. Tomorrow that risk will kind of fall apart. But what's interesting for us is even though that line will fall apart, don't be surprised if we hear a rumble of thunder tonight as the front crosses. But tomorrow, I mean, sunshine, the wind becomes a story. I think that's going to be a bigger deal than anything. Overnight tonight, temperatures could actually go up. I really want to quickly show you the forecast tonight because it's kind of a unique forecast. Normally you go into the overnight hours, the temperature goes down, right? This is a rare case because a warm front comes in. We see the rain chances go down, but the temperature go up. So be prepared for some warming temperatures. You're likely going to see warmer air when you wake up tomorrow morning than when you went to bed. So our hour-by-hour futurecast will show the rain over us now. That's pretty evident here at 6:30. By 7, it's still there. It begins to push east by midnight. There should be a lull when that southerly wind kicks in, and that will bring in really warm air. Here comes the cold front. So if we're going to see a rumble of thunder, it's going to be right there, 3 o'clock. Let's say 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. That would be the time frame I would watch for maybe some rumbling out there, but the winds will be picking up incredibly from the south initially and then switching around to the northwest. This is going to be an incredibly windy period tomorrow morning for most of our area. Now, we need the rain. Tim and I talked about this yesterday. As expected, the drought monitor, it got worse. I mean, we haven't seen much rain. I know it doesn't feel like rain, a drought is in place because we're not cutting grass, things aren't growing. It's kind of hard to tell, actually, unless you're looking at actually other impacts. But right now, we're in moderate drought for most of our area. And if you're not in moderate drought, you're abnormally dry. So every drop of rain we got today was exactly what we needed, and hopefully we'll get more. I don't think it's going to put a dent in the drought, but at least it helps, at least temporarily. Now, we talked about the wind. We've got wind advisories and high wind warnings up for most of our area. This is going to be a potent windstorm that comes in tonight and tomorrow, and I'll show you what it looks like here on our futurecast wind. So when that front arrives, 3 o'clock in the morning, you'll see temperatures jump up into the 60s, but the winds also jump up as well with that south flow, maybe even mid to upper 30 mile per hour wind speed. So really windy. That might be something that wakes you up in the middle of the night. You might even hear the leaves blowing around, the shutters banging, whatever you have loose outside. That certainly looks to be a possibility. And then look at tomorrow. Once the front clears us, we've got really strong winds moving through parts of the mountains, and those gusts there could be approaching 50 to 60 miles per hour. And for that reason, that's why we have high wind warnings for areas like Watauga County and Ashe County, but I would say even Avery County, Yancey, Mitchell County, Upper Burke and Caldwell certainly could see potential for some strong winds that could cause some damage. And the kind of damage we're talking, not widespread, but tree branch comes down here, power line here and there, certainly in the realm of possibility overnight into tomorrow. And even in the afternoon, the winds calm down for the Piedmont. They stay pretty elevated as we go into the mountains and foothills. So just a heads up, if you got those inflatables out there, you're going to want to make sure they're either tethered down really strongly or maybe just deflate them tonight, because the potential is we could see some of that stuff blowing down the street. And if it's trash night, make sure you get those trash cans first thing in the morning, because that certainly could lead to trash cans blowing down the street as well. Now, the next thing we got to turn our attention to after the rain moves out, after we get past the wind tomorrow, the next story is the warmth. And I mean, this is not just us. The whole country is going to be under what essentially amounts to a heat dome over Texas and parts of southern Oklahoma, basically the southern plains. And that heat dome kind of locks in place through the end of the year right now. It looks like really warm conditions for most of the country. And so we've been showing you the trends for Christmas and, Christmas Day. It's still trending up. I mean, there's no signs of cool weather, at least through next week. And I actually think we could see temperatures be warmer than this in a few locations. So if you're planning ahead for the holiday, I would plan for some warm conditions. And it kind of starts this weekend. So the weekend is coming up. Saturday looks like a nice day. Cold start, 30 degrees in the morning. We're back up 58. But 64 for Sunday for that home Panthers game against Tampa Bay certainly looks to be a pretty nice day for football. I kind of wanted it to be worse so we could, have a little edge on Tampa Bay, but looks like more like Tampa Bay weather. And then we look ahead to at least Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. Right now I'm going with temperatures upper 60s, close to 70 degrees. I've been fluctuating back and forth. And here's a look at our Jerry Hunt Supercenter 7-day forecast. Kind of shows you that warming trend after Monday, which will be crisp and cool. We'll see temperatures kind of jump up to near 60 on Tuesday. And for Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, we're in the upper 60s. Notice next Friday, 72 and 68 on Saturday. Honestly, anytime between Wednesday and Saturday, we could see highs around 70 degrees. So 4 days. This is a mini heat wave by December standards, especially by then, because the average high on Christmas Day in Charlotte is 53. The average low is 33 by then. So it just expect temperatures to be way above that by about 15 to 20 degrees. And it won't just be us, most of the country outside of New England, okay? So we'll talk about the warm temperatures for Christmas. We'll talk a little bit about the severe weather tonight, but we're mainly going to focus on the plane crash. Unfortunately, Greg Biffle's passing in that plane crash today, and Tim Buckley and I will break down some of the data we know. We'll talk about the weather impacts, if any. There really wasn't, but we'll kind of get into that a little bit, and we'll talk more about that as we continue the coverage of the tragic events up in Statesville coming up after the break. related, but was the tragic events that happened up in Statesville. And it's kind of a unique area for us because our two TV markets kind of meet up there. And I know you guys have done stories on Greg Biffle, and this has been a big story for you. What have you guys been talking about today, and what's been the sentiment from the Triad area about this tragic plane crash today?
Well, I think everybody feeling the same way, right? It's just, gosh, how could this happen? It's just super tragic right before Christmas. But we actually, we talked about Greg a lot not that long ago, just a couple of months back, with the Helene anniversary. One of our anchors here, Megan Malera, sat down with Greg. And they talked for about half an hour about, the whole Helene operation that he was so active and involved with his aviation, specifically with helicopter missions. And that was one of the things that Greg really contributed out of his own time, his own expense, his own willingness to help out and do something. And I think that just speaks a lot to his character and what he was about. And to see this now with an aviation tie-in and such a tragedy coming about, it's just horrible to see. And I think at this point, Brad, we're still kind of unsure, right? Like what type of cause there could be. I certainly don't have any inside information about that, but the weather has not been the best today. I don't know if that's a factor, but just horrible to see these images for sure.
Yeah, Tim, we're meteorologists. A lot of us dabble in aviation, or we have some connection to aviation because, let's be honest, if you're a pilot, you've probably taken meteorology courses at some point, and if you're a meteorologist, you deal a lot with aviation because it's part of it. They just cross over quite a bit, and it's funny because so many of our colleagues, Tim, are pilots and meteorologists. Neither of us are pilots, right, but we deal a lot with some of these conditions, and we understand like flight rules at airports, the METARs, which we read all the time. We read kind of the same language that pilots do. But, the first thing we always think of, Tim, we're meteorologists, and we see a plane crash. We think, okay, could weather be a contributing factor? Because it is oftentimes a factor in these crashes. But I'll be honest with you, it wasn't great this morning, but it was a lot better at 10 a.m., 10:15 a.m. in Statesville than it was this afternoon and this evening when it got really bad. I could not find anything too crazy weather-wise. No strong winds, not a ton of turbulence, not a ton of icing. Probably the only thing that I looked at that maybe kind of just to peel back was the METAR had 5,000 foot overcast and had broken at 1,200. So it wasn't perfect visibility, Tim, but it was pretty good up to 5,000 feet, which is not bad even for a plane that didn't have instrumentation. But this was a big plane. This was not like your typical, I think people hear Cessna, that's the company name, not the type of plane. This was a Citation. This was basically a private jet, right? And it had all the equipment to fly in the clouds. So there's really nothing that jumps off the map to me, at least, that there was a ton of weather issues there. There was some drizzle. The visibility, I think, was like at times was about a 5 mile, and then it got worse as it went on. But at least initially, I don't think weather was a big factor. But we really won't know, Tim, until the NTSB fully investigates this.
Yeah, Brad, do you know the exact, I know they've mentioned it was in the 10 o'clock hour. What's interesting about the 10 o'clock hour, I've got this pulled up here. If you look at Statesville on the left. So this is about 10 o'clock on the nose. At 10 o'clock on the nose, the visibility was about 10. But if you go to 10:15, it's 5. And then if you go to 10:40, well, then it's down to 1.75 miles. So it is decreasing during that time. Now, planes take off and land in fog all the time, right? So I can't say that that's a factor. And I don't know exactly what minute it happened. I don't remember. But there's been fog. There's been that cool air wedge that we talk about that's been creating some of that fog along with the drizzle. But otherwise, not a ton of really harsh crosswind or anything like that I noticed. So it's hard to say. And you had posted earlier, which I thought was really interesting, the flight path. And again, not a pilot, not an aviation expert. Don't claim to be. But if you're taking off and then you go around just very shortly and then immediately start to return to the airport, well, that might suggest to me that there's some sort of an issue with the aircraft, right? So that we don't know, but that could have been a factor.
Yeah, normally in weather situations, you're not turning around to go back to the airport because if the weather was bad at the airport, that's probably the last place you want to go back to, right? So there clearly was something wrong with the plane, and they were trying to get the plane on the ground. So this is the flight path, just to tell everybody. So this is public data. All planes have, this ABS data. So I went back and I grabbed the flight path, and I'm going to try to pull this back a little bit. And so it took off. I try to do this so it's a little sensitive here. We'll pull this back, just try to fly it backwards here and show you what happened. So the plane took off, and I'm going to zoom in and kind of show you. It took off in this direction, took basically a left turn. Mm-hmm. It got some elevation here. So this is a 3D plot. This shows you how high off the ground it was. And then it immediately took a left turn. Now what's interesting, some of the pilots I talked to, Tim, we're kind of curious. So it was coming back to the airport. Clearly, they radioed in that they were having engine trouble. We don't know what that means. Was the engine out? Was it malfunctioning? Was it weak? We don't know. But if you look carefully, the airport is right here. They could have came in and just landed the opposite direction, right? If there was an emergency, they would have cleared the airfield, could have landed. So some of the pilot friends I have had said, why didn't they just land right there? Why did they circle around at a much lower altitude, by the way, come in? And I know we've all seen the pictures. I don't want to show them again. They're kind of horrible. But even though you see that burning debris on the runway, the plane didn't actually make it to the runway. It landed short in this golf course. It actually took out some trees, a fence. There's a big scour in the ground here where it came up short. And then the debris, because of the forward momentum, ended up on the runway. And so what that tells you, and just this is the thing I do know about planes, and to create lift, you got to force air over the wings, right? So there's two ways to do that. With the engines going fast, or at higher altitudes, you can dip the nose and pick up speed through descent, and actually creates lift. And so if you don't have lift close to the ground, the only thing that's going to help you is an engine. And if you only have one engine, then that's where you run into some issues. So I guess the leading theory is they had some type of engine power issue. They clearly did not have enough lift to make it all the way to the runway. And we don't know if the engine was blown out. We don't know if it just was malfunctioning. And even I've heard, a bird strike is certainly in the realm of possibility, got ingested into one of the engines. But we talked to Chris Dunn, who's a colleague of ours. He's out at our Phoenix station. I talked to him today on our live Impact News, and he's a brilliant guy, by the way. He's a meteorologist, a pilot. He's an instructor, and he also buys and sells airplanes, so he knows a lot. And he was pretty clear. He said, Tim, that this plane could fly with one engine, and he even said you could actually fly it with no engines if you had enough time to glide it in. So he was curious as well what was going on. So we talked to him today, and this is a little piece of the interview we had with him, and he had some really good insight on, from a pilot's perspective, on what could have been going on. Did instruction. He's very familiar with these planes. Obviously not going to know a lot about this particular crash, but I wanted to bring in Chris Dunn, the chief meteorologist from our Phoenix 12 station. And Chris, thanks for joining us. And I know you know a lot about the Citation 550 and you're a pilot yourself. Could you tell our viewers watching online a little bit about what is going through a pilot's mind when they're taking off and they report engine trouble? What's the process that they would be going through to maybe get back to the airport, or how does that work from a pilot standpoint?
Well, thanks for having me on, Brad. The first process is you want to deal with the emergency, and all pilots, no matter the skill level or the certification level, you're taught to deal with an engine out, whether it's if you have one or two or four engines on the airplane. So you deal with the emergency, and the first rule of any emergency in aviation is fly the airplane. Now, I was looking at some of the observations in that area, and they probably were in the clouds at that point, or maybe not, but pretty close to being in the clouds. So that adds an extra dimension. Not only are you trying to deal with an airplane that may not be functioning properly, but you also have the fact that you can't see outside, which in a normally functioning airplane is perfectly fine. And we're not sure, or at least I have not seen from some of the reports, if they have checked on with air traffic control at that point, because Statesville Statesville is a non-tower controlled airport, which is fine. You just do self-announces. But if you're flying IFR or instrument flight rules into the clouds, you are given a release time, you take off, and then you check in with air traffic control. I don't know if they had an opportunity to do just that, but obviously there was some sort of a problem where they took off and they made an immediate left-hand turn coming back to the airport, trying to get back on the ground. So if there was some sort of an engine problem or an engine failure, the first thing you want to do is secure the engine and try to keep the aircraft under control, and then try to get it back down on the ground as quickly as possible.
So if you lose one engine, obviously this plane can fly with one engine. We heard from another expert that it technically could fly with no engines for a while at altitude, obviously. What is the biggest problem with flying with one engine? Let's say one's completely out and you're coming in for landing. What are some of the pitfalls that a pilot might have to deal with as they're coming in for an emergency landing, which this would be, right?
Yeah, certainly it can fly on one engine because it has two. The biggest challenge, if you will, is something called asymmetrical thrust. So if you think about it, you have two engines, and if you lose one, the other one is going to cause it to yaw or shift over to one side. So you have to account for that. And a lot of the multi-engine training, the curriculum, is based on what happens if you do lose an engine, and how are you going to treat that emergency. You need to shut down the one inoperative engine and then be able to control the airplane flying on one engine. So there are a lot of procedures that you have to do, and then flying an instrument approach on a single engine in a multi-engine aircraft, that's a big part of training and the recurrent training as well. So there's a lot of emphasis put into that in the training environment on operating on just one engine in a multi-engine aircraft. So the flight crew, don't know if there was one or two. I believe the Citation 550 is certified for single pilot operations, but a lot of these operators do operate with two pilots up front, and that just adds an extra layer of safety. We don't know exactly the nature of the accident and the crash and the situation, and of course in the coming days we'll find out more, we'll learn more about exactly what happened. But typically flight crews at that level are very well trained to handle a situation like that. But as I said, you have layers of different things that are going on at the same time, and that can make it extra difficult to deal with a situation like that.
So, Chris, I mean, they took off. You said it's an untowered airport. With Statesville Airport's pretty small for most airport standards, but a lot of commercial, I would say commercial, but private jets fly out of there because of the NASCAR teams. Would there be a reason for them to go back to that airport or try to go to another airport? The fact that this happened so quickly, was that just the best place to go right after they reported the trouble they had?
Yeah, and if they were, their mindset was, we got to get this on the ground right now. We just left a perfectly good airport right behind us. Let's do a U-turn and get right back down on the ground. If they had everything under control and things were stabilized, they could declare a May Day and try to get back into Douglas, the big airport with a lot more facilities and a lot more emergency response there. But I think their mindset was, we got to get this on the ground. We got to get it on the ground now. We just left an airport behind us. Let's turn back around and get back down on the ground. Again, I can't put my mind in the minds of the pilots on that airplane, but that would be my first guess as to why they turned back around and try to get back down to the ground in Statesville.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Chris. One last question before we let you go. I really appreciate you taking this time, and I'm glad you're giving us this input. That we don't know a lot of the information, but from an aircraft standpoint, you're familiar with this aircraft. What can you tell us about this specific aircraft? What is its typical usage, passenger load, those kind of things? What would this aircraft normally be used for?
Yeah, exactly what they were using it for. Executive transport, business aviation, the Citation 2, the line, the 525, 550, to be a little more technical. Very popular business jet. This one, I looked up the number. I think it was manufactured in 1981, which is not a big deal. You think a 1981 car wow, that's really old. But for an aircraft, not so much, because every airplane in the U.S., in order to legally fly, they have to undergo an annual inspection. That doesn't that goes for the airliners, business jets, even the small trainers. Everything has to be inspected annually. And in addition, those inspections are much more in depth on a jet aircraft. And then the insurance requirements are usually pretty high. So you're dealing with a lot of levels and a lot of layers of certification, of the training of the aircraft. Typically, the aircraft, 6 to 8 people on board, and you can do 1,500-mile legs, 2,000-mile legs. So say from Charlotte to New York, that's an easy hop. Charlotte to Miami, Florida. My understanding was this was heading down to Florida and then out to the Bahamas. A pretty common mission for this aircraft. So they are used for personal transport, for business transportation, and Statesville is perfectly fine to use that airport. 7,000-foot runway, plenty of runway length, and they're just outside of the busy, what's called the Class Bravo airspace in Charlotte, which is a highly restricted zone of airspace. So they can take off and they can land. They don't have to even talk to anybody in air traffic control, unless they're flying into the clouds and on an IFR flight plan, which they most likely were, and aircraft like this typically are. So once they get in the clouds and they check in with Charlotte Approach, and then they're handed off to Washington, D.C. Center or Jacksonville Center or something like that. And so the different layers of air traffic control will handle them. But again, it's really early in the process, and we're trying to just look at some of the details and pick apart what went on, and I'm sure a lot of those questions will be answered in the coming days. And unfortunately, to hear the news that you had in the breaking news at the top of this cut-in, an unfortunate end to this crash.
Yeah. Site there. He's a wealth of knowledge, a really smart guy, and deals with a lot of that. And without speculating about the cause, I thought that was a good insight from a pilot's perspective on what happened. I heard that more than once. Something he said that, and some of my other pilot friends said, that the goal in this situation is to fly the aircraft. And people that don't understand what that means, it's like there's a lot of stuff going on, like stressful stuff. There's probably buzzers going off, alarms. You got passengers probably very scared. The goal is just to fly the plane, do whatever it takes to get that thing down safely.
Yeah, I mean, it's super educational just to hear all of those things about the plane, things that we wouldn't understand as non-pilots. But just the fact that there are still a lot of things that you can do, and something went wrong in that short amount of time in the air that was just irrecoverable. So we'll learn more about that tomorrow, unfortunately. It's just so sad.
Yeah, and we might find out that maybe weather wasn't a direct cause, Tim, but one thing that when I spoke with Chris and another pilot friend of mine that said that might have happened was as they were coming back to the airport because of that low cloud deck, which I saw that the maximum altitude they got to was like 1,500 feet, that maybe they got lower to get below the cloud deck so they could see the airport instead of relying on the instruments. Okay. And that might have made them come in lower than they normally would have. So that's speculation, but that was something that was brought up by a pilot saying, hey, maybe they tried to get below the cloud deck to see the runway, and that could have been a problem because that plane needs a little bit more speed and room, and they just didn't have as much because of the low cloud deck.
Right. Yeah. Certainly, all speculation right now, but that kind of makes sense. So we'll just have to see what we learn tomorrow, I guess.
Yeah, well, thanks everybody for joining us tonight. Kind of a tragic day. We'll have more coverage on this with Colin Mayfield coming up in about 2 minutes right here on WCNC Plus.